Welcome, everybody. Let's go ahead and get started. Each of our webinars is dedicated to the NICU children of one of our speakers. Today, we have the honor of dedicating this webinar to Gavin Malcolm. Thank you for sharing G with us, Mia. You are truly a change maker. A little housekeeping. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking and turn off your camera if you need to multitask. We ask that all questions and comments, whether spoken or in the chat, remain respectful, non-discriminatory, and non-judgmental. Your cooperation helps us keep this space safe and welcoming for everyone. Thank you. As a reminder, we follow the all-in meeting guidelines as created by our very own Jennifer Canvassers Next Society. For those of you who are attending for the first time, we use first names to address one another, to break down the hierarchy that exists in healthcare, and to empower everyone to contribute. I'd like to acknowledge our webinar sponsor, Mead Johnson Nutrition, whose mission is protect, heal, and nurture in pursuit of a healthier world. Thank you, MJN, for sponsoring this webinar, and congratulations on over 120 years of leadership in pediatric nutrition. A warm welcome to our newest organizational partners, California Association of Neonatology, Institute for Patient and Family-Centered Care, Free Arm, Generation O, Prematuridad, and South Dakota Perinatal Quality Collaborative and Tiny Baby Collaborative. We look forward to working together to spread the word about family-centered care. We are now partnered with 70 internationally esteemed healthcare-based and family-led organizations dedicated to improving care for NICU babies and their families. This work would not be possible without your support. We're excited to announce that the Family Centered Care Task Force has received nonprofit 501c3 status. We've welcomed Bob, Mitch, Ashley, and Jay Dean to our board of directors and appreciate their guidance. The FCC Task Force's guiding principle is equal partnership between healthcare professionals and NICU families in everything we do, which is exemplified by our leadership team and structure. She'll resent me for it, but I would like to shout out Malathi for creating this incredible organization, which just celebrated its 4th birthday. Malathi does this work on a strictly volunteer basis, and we have all benefited from her dedication to improving FCC in the NICU. Thank you to Daphna and Emily for their support during their time on our executive council. We're sad to say goodbye for now and appreciate their unique contributions to our organization. We'd like to welcome Anisha, Ramya, Andrea, Lynette, Misty, and Amanda to our executive councils of family and healthcare partners. Each of these folks brings unique professional and lived experience to this work, and we're grateful you're here. Thank you to our family partners for your contributions. I love that we are diverse in our infants' gestational ages and diagnoses, and that we represent birthing, non-birthing, adoptive, and bereaved parents. I'd also like to thank our multidisciplinary healthcare partners for volunteering their time and expertise. We've created an advisory council of family and healthcare partners to support our work on an as-needed basis and look forward to collaborating with them this year. I'm excited to share that we've got over 3,000 members from 49 of 50 US states, 9 of 10 Canadian provinces, and from 80 countries around the world. This month, our poll centers around child life services in the NICU. Even if your unit doesn't provide child life, we would like to hear from you. We invite you to join next week's session, open forum session facilitated by Jess Daigle and Alex Zavala. They'll be discussing building trust during high-stakes decisions, successfully overcoming disagreements between clinicians and families in the NICU. The open forum sessions are not recorded in an effort to facilitate a safe space for sharing, so we hope to see you there in person. We're excited to share that our new and improved website has launched. More dynamic and user-friendly, our new site has gotten us away from the Google Drive links that aren't compatible with many hospital firewalls. We hope you love the new look as much as we do and are grateful to Small Talk NICU Egg System for sponsoring this important project. Don't forget to find us on social media and tag us in your FCC-related work so that we can share it. I'd like to add that if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you'll get early access to a recording of this webinar. Finally, we invite you to register for the 39th Annual Gravens Conference to share your work. The abstract deadline has been extended to March 15th, so it's not too late to submit your work. And with that, I will go ahead and introduce our first speakers for today. Dr. Malathi Balasundaram is a neonatal intensivist at El Camino Health and a clinical professor at Stanford University. She is a passionate FCC advocate and formed the International FCC Task Force to bridge the gap between research and bedside FCC practices. Mia Malcolm is Community Engagement Specialist at Ollie Hinkle Heart Foundation, co-chair of the FCC Task Force's EDIBJ committee, and holds senior research coordinator positions at both Washington University and Stanford School of Medicine. She is the NICU parent of Gavin, who is still wondering what her barriers are to putting fresh strawberries on his French toast. With that, I will pass it over to you, Malathi, just a reminder to stop recording.
Thank you, Morgan. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Thank you, Morgan, for the introduction and all that you do for this task force work, and I appreciate you. And Mia and I are going to talk about the FCC task force research study, which is a cross-sectional mixed method study on measuring FCC practices in the NICU. We will share how it all came together, the methods and the results. We ask that you do not take a pictures of our slides and while we are working on publishing our manuscript, and thank you. Next slide. So first I want to acknowledge the early adapters of these 99 centers who took the time to complete this comprehensive survey. Reach out to us if you'd like to know your center scores, and we'll be happy to share the FCC practices that you completed. Next slide. So a great appreciation to these 45 NICUs who took the time to meet with us to learn more about their center scores and identify areas of improvement. So if you work in one of those NICUs, kudos to you and your team. If others want to measure their center's FCC performance, reach out to us or share your interest in the form that Morgan is going to put in the chat, so we can share our new version of the survey. So this research work is not stopping here. So we wanted to continue this going so we can expand this work. Thank you for all your commitment to the FCC. I sincerely thank my research team for their dedication to this critical work and the NICU Parent Network for their collaboration, and Stanford Impact Labs for their funding support. Next slide.
Okay, we're moving on to Dr. Jim Barry. He has been a neonatologist for 25 years, and he is a professor of pediatrics within the University of Colorado School of Medicine. He has held various leadership positions that have focused on improving the processes and the safety of care to support better outcomes for staff, patients, and families in the neonatal ICU, most notably as medical director of the University of Colorado Hospital NICU for the last 18 years. He's also got some more impressive language in his bio, and I'm going to go ahead and drop that in the chat so that everybody can read it and we can hear from Jim directly about the work that he's doing. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Jim. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you so much for the kind invitation and the great work that you guys are doing. So the FCC task force is just doing amazing work, and I'm sure you guys are proud of it. And I saw somebody was on from the Czech Republic, so that's pretty amazing that you have some international components here as well. So that's pretty neat. And did it go to a disclosure slide? Okay. So I don't have any financial disclosures related directly to this talk. I may mention different companies and names. I'm not endorsing them and I have no financial relationship with them. I'm just using them as examples. I am on the AI advisory board for Helio, and I'm co-founder and president of NeoMind AI, which also just became a 501c3 organization. And it's a group of neonatologists, data scientists, clinical informaticists, neonatologists, pediatricians, all kind of working together to evaluate AI in neonatology in our healthcare space to make sure that it's safe, effective, and ethical. I think everybody talking nowadays should actually have an AI disclosure slide. So 50% of the figures in my talk actually come from Dolly 3 Notebook or Nano Banana, Napkin AI. when I'm learning about topics, I use something called Notebook LM. So if you guys haven't started using Notebook LM yet, if you're a learner or educator, it's a great model that you can use for free, and it does a lot of different things. All the presentation for me is from me today. I'm not an avatar. So we'll talk about kind of where AI is, some issues with AI, and maybe how to think about it both from a clinician's perspective, from a parent's perspective, from a organization that supports parents' perspective, because I see some of those on here today. I try to create a talk that was kind of broad, but at the same time, kind of approaching things from different angles. First of all, I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. I only use encyclopedias and books to learn. When I call my son in Washington, D.C., I only use a rotary phone like this. Anybody remember a phone that looks like this? I see some smiles. When I want to communicate with my mother in Florida, I take out a pen, write a letter, and send it through the U.S. Postal Service. When I want to solve mathematical problems, I pull out a piece of paper and use a pencil. When I want to detect congenital heart disease, I only use a stethoscope in my hands. Is this how you guys approach things as well? Well, of course not, because it's 1989 and we use available technology to do a lot of those things. So now we have cell phones that we text through, use social media, actually call people on, send emails through, take pictures, videos. Our cell phones really are a center of a lot of our communication. If I really am determined to really detect congenital heart disease, I don't just use a stethoscope and physical exam anymore. I use ultrasound, MRI, cardiac catheterization, laboratory data. All of those kind of things go into to support diagnosis. We even have machines that support heart and lung bypass. So technology has really changed the way that we provide care in the NICU and in hospitals in general. And also our families and parents and caregivers are using technology different as well. Everybody has a cell phone nowadays, and there's social media, there's Facebook sites where people are getting information and understanding healthcare. Back in 2021, there was a book written by Henry Kissinger, US Secretary of State, Eric Schmidt, who's a ex-Google CEO, and Dan Huttenlocher, who's a pretty famous scientist at MIT. And they wrote a book focused on AI. And in it, they say technology is changing human thought, knowledge, perception, and reality. And doing so is changing the course of human history. And this was before ChatGPT came out in 2021. And I would say that we all could agree that AI is changing a lot of what's occurring in our society and healthcare. We've seen or been involved in or been the recipient of disruptive technologies. So the light bulb was a disruptive technology. When Thomas Edison zapped light through or electricity through a filament and it emitted light, it changed forever the way that our society created light. No longer was it fire and candles. When Henry Ford created the Model T Ford, it changed the way travel occurred and no longer depended on horses. And he's famous for saying if people at that time, what they were asking him to do was just make faster horses instead of making the gas combustion engine and change things. Well, I think we're faced with something right now that's going to be like the light bulb, like the Model T Ford, and that's AI. And it's going to change our society, and most certainly is going to change healthcare, and it already is starting to change it. So I want you to think right now, your past week, if you didn't have the internet, if you didn't have a computer, if you didn't have a cell phone, could you have done your job like you did this week? No, none of us can. So we rely now on these disruptive technologies in ways that we could have never imagined just 30 years ago. The internet took about 20 years from the time it was created to the time that most of society adopted it. Smartphones, it's taken about 15 years. AI is going to be somewhere 3 to 5 years where most of society will adopt it. So much quicker than any other technology before it. And from my perspective, and probably from yours, it's a little bit too fast, but it's occurring, and we just have to kind of deal with what's occurring. If you look at AI focused publications, In 2015, there was about 300 publications focused on AI. 2023, there was about 6,500. Today, there's probably closer to 8,000 to 9,000 publications focused on AI this year alone. Multiple times this past summer, Bill Gates says that AI will replace doctors, teachers, and many more in the next 10 years. Demis Hassabis, who's the Google DeepMind CEO, that's their AI arm, says that AI can end disease in the next decade. This came from the New Yorker in the fall of this year. If AI can diagnose patients, what are doctors for? So there really is a sentiment from the big tech companies and media that clinicians and doctors only diagnose things and that's all we do. And we treat diagnosis, which we all know, especially the FCC task force, we do much more than that and we can do better, but we certainly just don't diagnose things. But that's kind of the sentiment that's out there from big tech and media. And the reason that is because they're trying to fill a healthcare void. And here's an example of that. Doctronic created something called the Doctronic AI. It's a personal AI doctor. He said that there's 20 million people that have visited this AI doctor in the past since it was created, and I'm not sure when it was created. But if you don't just like the AI doctor, they can sign you up for a top doctor for a virtual visit for only $39. If you've been paying attention, Utah just rolled out the first autonomous AI prescription refilling model that can prescribe medications without an intervention from a doctor or clinician. And that came January 2026. And the interesting thing is that the model also got malpractice insurance. They were granted malpractice insurance. January 7th, ChatGPT introduced ChatGPT Health. So you can send in your medical records to this ChatGPT and it's going to help you understand your medical problems. A week later, Claude AI for healthcare was introduced and Claude AI for life sciences was introduced as well. So they're really trying to fill a gap in healthcare and it really does exist. So there's what they found, this was a publication from OpenAI who created ChatGPT, found that there's 2 million queries per week focused just on healthcare insurance. So people are trying to understand their healthcare insurance. 3 to 5 adults have been using AI for healthcare questions in the last 3 months. 7 in 10 healthcare, let's see, your thing's in my way. 7 in 10 healthcare, I forgot what that was, and you're blocking me. Oh, 7 in 10 healthcare questions. Sorry, like the screen's blocking it. 7 in 10 healthcare queries were occurring after clinical hours. And there were over 600,000 users were using it and they're living in rural or underserved areas. So access is a big issue when it comes to these models. So there really is a huge amount of hype with these models really coming from startup companies, media, data scientists, and big tech, and maybe less coming from the healthcare side of things, administrators, ethicists, educators, patients, clinicians. I'm not sure that we're all as excited about AI as the tech companies are. I wanted you as kind of pediatricians to be aware of this and then also families and those that support families. OpenAI, that's run by Sam Altman, and that's the creator of ChatGPT. In June of last summer, Mattel and OpenAI announced a strategic collaboration. So Mattel, the toy company, now has the ability to put these models into their toys. This past winter in December, there was an agreement between Walt Disney and OpenAI to use Disney characters in probably some form with ChatGPT. And then, like I said, they introduced ChatGPT Health. So things really are changing and they're going to be different tomorrow than they are today. And I think we all owe it to our families, our patients, to be involved as much as we can be from the advocacy side and make sure that these models are being evaluated. So as an example of how these tech companies have changed, back in 2022, if you asked a large language model a health question, so large language models like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, Grok, and so forth, if you asked one of these models a healthcare related question, 26% of the time it would say, go ask your clinician or physician or healthcare provider. Now of 2025, it does that less than 1% of the time for the same questions. And there's a reason for that because they're trying to direct our society to start using these for healthcare. And so this was a publication that just came out over the last couple of weeks. And it came from investigators who were interested in figuring out, well, how well is this ChatGPT health performing? And there's a consumer-facing feature that this ChatGPT health has. And what it is it helps somebody decide what kind of medical evaluation they need. So the investigators created 60 different clinical scenarios and had them evaluated by experts. And the output would be for that patient who's putting in that information in this clinical scenario, is it okay for them to get monitored at home? Do they need to see a doctor in a few weeks? Do they need to see a doctor in 24 to 48 hours? Or do they emergently need to go to the emergency department? And what they found is, and this is a little bit busy slide, and I'll just hit the high points, is that kind of in the middle for routine scenarios or semi-urgent scenarios, the models did okay. There was a 93% accuracy for semi-urgent model. So the ChatGPT health answer was the same as the clinical experts. There was a 77% accuracy for urgent visits, but it really kind of failed at the non-urgent, you can stay at home and not go see your doctor, and the emergency visits. So for non-urgent, it was only accurate 35% of the time, and 65% of the time, it was telling people or patients that they should go be seen by the healthcare provider when there was no reason to do that. And then probably the more concerning is ChatGPT Health 50% of the time neglected to tell a patient or a person to go to the ER for something that emergently needed it. And the two main cases were asthma exacerbation and diabetic ketoacidosis. So it was saying that you don't have to go be seen emergently when you really did. So this is kind of the first evaluation of that model to see how well it's working. And I saw bits and pieces on social media and other things where people have said they've tried to use it and didn't work so well. I think that's the first published paper that I've seen that evaluates that and really would make me take pause if I was using that model. And so I wanted to bring that up today and to tell you all that the investigation for these models in healthcare is not as robust as it should be, and it needs to continue. And we as clinicians and advocates have to make sure that that continues. ChatGPT really has done amazing things. Faster than any technology before it, it's really being used. It took 5 days to reach 1 million users online. It took 2 months to reach 100 million users online. There's 2.5 billion messages going back and forth every day. And ChatGPT now has 900 million online users weekly. And it's thought that there's about 5.4 billion people in the world that have access to the internet. So 20% are now using these models on a weekly basis. What I wanted to highlight is that AI is much more than ChatGPT, even though that's what most people think about. And that we need to be more precise when we're clinicians talking about AI. We shouldn't be saying AI is going to fix this. Let's use AI for that. AI isn't magical, and it's not even singular as well. So AI is actually a big umbrella term that has a lot of different components underneath it, different models and approaches. As an example, natural language processing is built into survey evaluation, where it sorts through a lot of text and can pull out themes from surveys for us. When we're looking at huge amounts of data, we've already heard about linear logistic regression, and most of us have never thought of that as machine learning before, just a statistical approach, but it's a form of machine learning that over time it can churn through large amounts of data and give us important information and continually learn over time. Neural networks and deep learning are kind of the black box. The computer scientists created these models in a structure that's similar to how the human brain works with neurons and nodes and so forth. And they do amazing things, and they're powerful with huge amounts of data. And then generative AI is the new kid on the block, the ChatGPT, the Claude, the Gemini. So when we're talking about these models, we need to be much more precise and specific when we're talking about them. So instead of just saying AI did this, we should say things like, we'll use a deep learning model to assist in diagnosis of congenital heart disease from a chest x-ray. And indeed, that's what the investigators had done with this study. They used a model that could detect congenital heart disease from a chest x-ray. In addition to radiologists, it improved the sensitivity of this detection from 73% to 86%. And it used kind of a heat map approach so that people could understand what part of the chest x-ray the model was looking at to help identify the congenital heart disease. So the age of AI is here, whether we like it or not, and it's really moving quite quickly. I hear a lot of people talk about AIs at the tip of the hype cycle. So if any of you are familiar with this is what the hype cycle looks like. There's an innovation or trigger, and then there's a lot of excitement, and there's a peak of inflated expectations. And then over time, we realize the technology can't do everything that it was said to do and drops down to the trough of disillusionment. But over time, people start understanding the strengths and benefits and weaknesses of the model and then start using it. And so right now, probably the most advanced is computer vision. And so if you've driven a car today, you've used artificial intelligence because it helps with lane assist, with collision warning. If you've gone to the airport recently, TSA is using it. If you've gone to the amusement park, they're using this technology to say if you should get a fast pass or not. So computer vision is pretty mature as compared to other things like agentic AI, which is far to the left, but that's the thing that's growing, and you'll hear about that over the next year. And then ChatGPT is kind of tripping going down into the trough of disillusionment. So it's important for us to be much more precise when we're talking about these models, what they are, kind of where they are in the hype cycle or the level of maturity. They're transforming healthcare, whether we like it or not, but healthcare is kind of a contradiction in terms in that we still use fax machines to communicate. So we're the only industry that still uses this old archaic mode, but then we also use sophisticated technology. So it's kind of unusual, and how we adopt and evaluate I think will fall probably somewhere in between. Should AI be transforming healthcare? Isn't there a lot of ethical issues, integrity issues? Well, the answer is we need to, because the amount of data that we're being inundated by. Medical information is doubling about every month. There's greater than 800,000 publications per year, greater than 5,600 medical journals. New England Journal of Medicine alone has 48,000 publications per year. So we're surrounded by medical information, but we can't connect the dots to create insight, wisdom, and have impact on our patient care. We're also living in a new digital era where there's so much digital information. It was thought like 10 years ago that there was about 500 digital interactions that an individual would have in a given day. That number is now closer to 5,500 in the United States. Everything that we interact with is some form of digital interaction and digital information. The way we learn with computers, the way we sit in front of computers to actually do our work in hospitals, parents getting information at the bedside the same way. Continuous streams of data coming from our physiological monitoring devices, from our smart and wearable technology, data about population health. We're just surrounded by data, and us humans can't connect the dots and understand the patterns that exist in this data. And that's where machine learning and deep learning models are really helpful. 5 years ago is when I started learning about artificial intelligence. I didn't know anything about it. I heard a lot of healthcare leaders talking about it, so I decided I better learn. This was one of the first publications I looked at in 2022 where I had kind of an aha moment and really started understanding the power of these models. So the investigators created a deep learning model that could identify race from a chest x-ray. So every single one of these images going across here, the model was able to identify race, even the one that's outlined there in the green. Well, how can that be? My eye just sees a big gray box. Well, it turns out that there's about 5 million pixels per chest x-ray, and each pixel has information that these models use to understand and recognize patterns. The other thing that these investigators looked at, they were worried about bias. And so Leo Selly, who's kind of a middle author in here, is somebody that I follow quite a bit out of Boston. And what they're worried about, and we've already seen this occur with some of the models, is that there's some bias built into them. And so if you're using a model that's deciding if you get insurance coverage or not, or if you get a cancer therapy or not, you'd want to know everything that the model was basing its decision on. And if you determined that it was only basing it on a chest x-ray that identified race, that was a big issue. And it's an issue because we don't always understand how these bigger models are working. And so they really, and I think that we really need to understand these models and make sure that bias isn't just perpetuated in ways we never imagined before. But these models are developing new fields of medicine. So oculomics, the ability to look at a retinal image using machine learning, deep learning, and other models to identify important things like gender, body mass index, smoking status, hemoglobin A1C, blood pressure. Also can identify cardiovascular disease, cerebral vascular disease, metabolic and endocrine disorders, neurodegenerative disease, chronic kidney disease, hepatobiliary disease, all from an image of a retina. Now, if you're in any kind of medical training, you will have heard at some point in time that we were taught that the eye was the window to the brain, to the body. I don't think we ever imagined to this degree, and it's just starting. We're kind of at the tip of the iceberg. Acoustic epidemiology, voice is being used as a biomarker, especially in adults for Alzheimer's and dementia, that these models can detect symptoms before a patient actually has clinical symptoms. It's been used at UCSF to determine TB effectiveness in terms of TB being treated. And so listening to a patient's cough through a cell phone and analyzing and determining if the TB interventions are being effective or not. And if you think about it, in San Francisco, most of the patients with TB treatment probably don't live in San Francisco and they're in the greater region. And so now there's improved access to care evaluation. And that's how I think about a lot of artificial intelligence, that access to care, to especially subspecialty care, should be improved with these models. But there's going to be big issues. So garbage in versus garbage out, we've heard that many times before. Well, it's thought that only about 70% of healthcare data is usable because 30% of it is missing, mislabeled, or incorrect. Accountability, when one of these models causes a problem, who's going to be at fault? Is it the developer? Is it the healthcare system that purchased it? Is it the clinician that used it? Is it the individual patient who signed a consent or assent form to use it? Explainability is a big issue with these models, and I kind of highlighted that just there recently. But if a clinician can't understand how a model works, they're not going to use it in patient care. And patients wouldn't want it used in their care, or families wouldn't if the doctor can't explain how the model is working. And then trustworthiness is a big issue as well, because we don't know if we can trust the models, their output, and so forth, and they really need to be evaluated. But AI has really now somewhat disrupted, I would say, kind of the sacred patient-doctor relationship, and now is kind of inserted in the middle of that. And we as clinicians and patients and families just have to realize that that's occurring. And we have to still hold the trust that we have, that when patients and families come to us, that as a clinician, we're going to do everything that we can possibly to help them. And that trust has to transcend the use of AI. Probably the most widespread use of artificial intelligence in the US over the past year has been AI scribe. So bringing a cell phone into a clinic visit and having documentation created automatically from that visit. So some studies here show that it's beneficial. So Kaiser Permanente showed that they used it in 2.5 million patients, and it saved 16,000 working hours in about 1,800 working days. Mayo, in a smaller study using a bridge, showed it in clinicians had improved cognitive task load, decreased distraction, improved patient understanding of their own care plans, and decreased pajama time, so clinicians weren't doing documentation at home. Another study out of Yale, following about 300 clinicians using a bridge, showed that in a month period of time, symptoms of burnout decreased from 52% to 39%. As in most things in pediatrics, we're kind of left behind in terms of larger studies and then even interventions that are created just for pediatric patients. But in this small study, it showed that the clinician self-reported a reduction in cognitive burden, ability to finish work sooner, and more enjoyment in their work using one of these AI scribes. So these AI scribes have been shown to be beneficial, decreased documentation burden, more patient-family interaction, better patient and family understanding. And my wife is a family medicine doctor, and she has found that her patients really like the fact that she says her physical examination out loud. Because, and then I thought about it, there's oftentimes, when we're examining babies next to their parents, we don't always verbalize out loud what we're hearing and seeing on our physical examination. So it's a great thing, and adult patients have really responded well to my wife to that. There's improved documentation, coding and billing, and reimbursement using these models. But there's still a lot of questions with AI scribes that need to be answered. Is this good for every specialty, neonatology versus orthopedic surgery? It's not going to be. And then what's the omission error rate? How much is left out of an important conversation with a patient? And then actually how much is added that never existed in the conversation? So many people think these are just transcription devices, and they're not. They're still built on large language model technology, which is transformer technology, where they're predicting the next word or group of words in a sentence. So the transcription's never going to be exactly the same as what happened in the visit, and sometimes things are going to be missed and made up. Also, dialect bias is not really that well understood. So if you have a French American accent, or you're taking care of Somali patients, these models don't work nearly as good for those kind of patients. And so what do we do for them? And then as we become more comfortable with AI scribes, we're not going to check our work as much and just quickly sign. So automation complacency will be a big thing. And then as an ICU doctor, when I'm creating my notes, that's how I think about my patients, how I pull information from vital signs, labs, the history of the patient, from the nurse, from the mother, the physical exam. This is where I put all my information together. So simply having something create a note for me may not help, because that's how I think about my patients. And then kind of switching gears a little bit specifically to families, do they even want AI to be used in their care? There's some studies looking at that, and parents maybe, but they certainly, 93% of caregivers want to know if AI is being used in their child's care. And it's been found that parents are receptive to the idea of AI being used in their child's care if it improves things, basically, if it improves the quality and accuracy of the care that they're being provided, if it protects their child's data and their security, if there's still shared decision making. But what's loud and true in most every study, there should be preservation of human touch and intervention in these relationships. That AI can't replace that yet today. Now, if you ask the children themselves, there's been multiple studies looking at kids. What do they think about AI being used in their care? This was a study out of Toronto with 28 children, so a small study, but really that was pretty mature, I would say, in their thinking. The average age of the child was about 15, and they felt that AI could be used as long as there's a respect for persons, support for autonomy, and that humanistic care continued. And what they found in that study is the AI knowledge level of these children was much superior to most adults. There was also more of a national online survey, 31 questions or so in UK, and it was simple, asking kids if they would like AI involved in their care when it came to evaluating images. And they favored it as long as the image evaluation was more accurate and that speediness was not like the trumping factor. And when it parsed it down even further, the children who really wanted it to be used in their care were ones who had had a missed fracture on one of their x-rays. So 86% of those children who had had a missed fracture on a film really wanted AI to be used in their interpretations. And I would say radiology is probably the most advanced field, and we'll probably see in the next couple years that there's lawsuits for radiology departments not using AI as a secondary backup read. But the main issue, especially in children and pediatrics, this study highlights an issue in that most AI models are under investigation or just being developed. None of them are really ready for prime time. So this investigation looked at AI studies in the NICU and PICU, and they found about 250 of them. And going from left to right, those bubbles get bigger at about 2017 on, meaning that there's more studies each year involving AI in healthcare. On the y-axis, it's the level of maturity of the AI model. Is it right at the problem identification stage? Is it the model prototyping stage, all the way down to integration in clinical practice? And basically what they found is 9 out of 10 models are still in the prototyping or development stage. Very few are getting into clinical evaluation, and that's the big issue. There's a huge imbalance between creation of these models and imbalance in evaluation, implementation, and having us understand how to use them. And these are some prime examples. So this was a study looking at, can families get educated using basically ChatGPT? And in this case, they wanted to know if we could help families understand post-surgical care of a child who had cleft lip and cleft palate surgery. And so in the study, they created questions. There's about 13 questions that experts believe get asked most frequently after surgery, and then had ChatGPT 3.5 answer the questions. And the answers were only answered correctly about 69% of the time. So from my perspective, that's not very good. The authors of this study thought at least showed maybe some positive outcomes for families to get some information. I'm not sure that I agree with that, but that's what they said in their study. And then, can AI recognize children's emotional states? The answer is yes. There's many studies. So this was actually a review of 23 studies using AI for facial, voice, drawing-based emotional recognition using various types of AI models. And once again, most of them are in the model development stage. They really haven't been validated, certainly haven't been validated in randomized control trials like they need to be. But it shows that there's some potential. So this is one of the figures that I created using Notebook LM. So I don't know if any of you have used it yet, but you'll kind of get the sense if you've seen enough of them. They oftentimes look like this. But AI can help caregivers into the future, and this infographic kind of shows that. So it can help caregivers before and between visits following symptoms, trying to understand issues. It can help during complex or chronic illnesses, and it's been used a lot in kind of oncology support. It can improve health literacy for caregivers. And then further down, there's AI-enabled apps that can monitor how a patient's doing or an adolescent is doing and alerting parents if they're cyberbullying. It's also been used to create micro interventions for caregivers or parents how to interact with their children better. And then neonatology is all kind of at the very model prototyping, futuristic approach. But there's real life where these models have been used. A Connecticut father of two children used it, a large language model, to compile all the medical records that he had for his two children that had a rare complex condition. And he made it more understandable. So when he went to the next doctor's office or clinic visit, he could give them that information so he didn't have to explain it and dig through all the information. And you probably have heard about this one. There was a young boy who had had chronic pain for 13 years and had been seen by 17 specialists that didn't diagnose his condition. His mother put all of his symptoms and medical history into ChatGPT and identified that he may have a tethered cord, and indeed he did, and he had surgery and he no longer has pain. So there is real life value in some of these models. The other thing is that I think these models can be used to help families, caregivers, and even patients understand their own conditions better. Because you can create a prompt like I did here, act like an expert in communications. Your baby is going to have retinopathy of prematurity laser therapy. And you can have the output change. So you can have the explanation be for a PhD researcher in vascular biology where they talk about VEGF and hypoxia and so forth. Then you can say the mother is actually a high school biology teacher. So let's explain it at her level. And the next one could be, this is a 16-year-old who has limited IQ and limited biological or biology understanding. And then the output's modified. So there's a lot of power in the ability for these models to create education and output at somebody's learning level. And I do think there's real beauty in that. There's certainly big ethical considerations for AI in pediatrics. There's issues with privacy, issues with consent and assent, the right to an open future, meaning if you get labeled when you're young, that label may follow you for the rest of your life. There's issues with algorithmic bias and fairness. There's discrimination that it can occur. Using these models, there may be an erosion of trust between patients and caregivers. It's already been shown that some children are starting to develop an attachment to these AI models that is not healthy. So there's a lot of issues that we have to consider with AI in pediatrics, which is much different than the adult world. I think that we all need to kind of retake a Hippocratic oath for the age of AI, ensure that AI is safe and effective and worthy of clinical trust, that is governed with the same scientific rigor that require for other medical interventions, and that we make sure that it's transparent, that there's independent real world validation, and that it's integrated carefully, critically, and always under clear human authority. And when I started learning about AI, I took online courses and so forth, and this is probably the one that helped me the most, the American Board of AI in Medicine. For me, it was a 2-day course, but it introduced me to a community of people like myself that were trying to learn about AI application in healthcare. And I'm on a WhatsApp group with them, and there's about 800 people around the world that are talking about AI in healthcare kind of constantly in our group. And here's some books, websites, online courses for you. And lastly, I wanted to say that NeoMind AI, it's a group that we created for people like you all that are interested in creating a community around AI in our healthcare space in neonatal, perinatal, and pediatric medicine. And we want to develop a community for education, scholarship, and learning together because AI is moving fast. Too fast from my perspective, but we have to deal with what's here today. But we have to be advocates for our patients and families and make sure that AI is applied safely, effectively, and ethically in pediatric medicine. And we really need to much better understand bias than we do today. So thanks for allowing me to come talk with you today. I try to paint a broad stroke that could be of interest to many of you from all sides, being clinicians to family support organizations and everything. And here's my contact information, my email and LinkedIn if you want to follow me there or converse with me there. I post quite a bit about AI, and there's a NeoMind AI. We have monthly webinars, kind of like this, and there we're creating newsletters that put out information about how you can use large language model prompting, what are some important approaches to use for medical education, articles of interest, and so forth. So you can get on our listserv if you want, and we're more than happy to welcome you and learn from you and with you in this age and era of AI. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Jim. Oop, I think I might have just frozen. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your presentation. We've got about 6 minutes for Q&A, and I'm going to start with a question that Malathi put in the chat. She wants to know, as an AI illiterate clinician, where can I start? How can I support families?
Well, first of all, I do think the American Board of AI in Medicine is a good place to start because you can get some fundamental information. You can find a lot online now too. And like I had showed, Coursera was one where I learned a lot. But basically what I found, and I think I've spoken at about somewhere between 25 and 40 institutions this past year. And usually when I'm in an audience, I'll ask how many of you even have a Chat GPT account or Claude or Gemini? And only between 30 and 50% of the people raise their hands. So the first thing you can do is sign up for an account, it's free, and make sure that you're using it in a way where you're trying to understand its strengths and limitations. So don't put any private information about yourself or your patients in there. It's not HIPAA compliant. And the way I tell people is that if you're afraid that it would end up being in the San Francisco Chronicle, the information you put in there, if it made headline news and you'd be embarrassed or scared that it was there, don't put it in there. But really, it's starting to use this. And how I equate it is like auto literacy. So most of us drive a car. We don't really know how the car works, like unless you're a mechanic, which most of us aren't. But we bring a key, we either put it in the ignition and turn it or now hit the button and the car starts and we drive away. but we know the rules of the road, right? So we've taken driver's ed, we passed a written test and a true driver's test, and now we know when to stop at a stoplight, what to do when we're merging in traffic, what to do in a pedestrian crosswalk. We need to be AI literate like we are auto literate because this
Mm,
is not going away, and we owe it to ourselves and our patients to do that. And there's different ways to do that. The American Board of AI and Medicine, our NeoMind AI group, is also creating short kind of educational sessions as well, along with probably the Incubator podcast folks, if you've heard those
mm.
rock stars.
Oh, yeah.
And then Daphna, we're working with them to create AI education along with them. And it'll probably be in short little, more like TikTok, YouTube video clips. So that's something that's in process. But you have to take the step and just do it. And one of the main reasons is because most patients, families, and caregivers are going to be using these models. And a lot of times the models are going to be correct, but sometimes they're going to be wrong. And you need to invite that into the conversation, and you can't push it away because these models are really good today. And so you have to invite that in and say, oh, what did Grok tell you about vitamin K deficiency and MTHFR gene mutation, which is what a family asked me like 2 weeks ago, and I had to use a model along with them. So it's
Mm,
just another part of our healthcare process, I think.
hmm. Thank you. We had another question. Can you give a prompt for um, PICU research for AI for somebody that just wants to play around and learn more?
A PICU prompt?
Yeah.
I'm
Uh,
not really sure. I do give workshops on how to prompt models, but it would depend on what you want to know in the PICU. But I'll tell you, when I'm doing my own literature searches today, I don't use PubMed specifically anymore. I use open evidence, I use consensus, and I use perplexity. And I'll ask my question there. And the reason use those three models, they all three of them come at it from a little different angle, but every single one of them in their output or answer creates a reference. So you can click on that reference and then it brings you to the source. So you can verify the information that it's giving you is true. And so that's my first step. So I'll get the articles on the topic from those three models, and then I actually take those articles and dump them into Notebook LM. And Notebook LM really is a game changer in terms of learning information because you can learn information. You give the model its kind of training data set, it can only use the information you put in the folder. So if there's 10 articles about retinopathy of prematurity that are best, you put them in the folder and then you use that model to ask questions of those 10 articles. It creates mind maps, slides, infographics, briefing reports, creates a podcast, can create slides with a video and voice overlay. So no matter how you learn and think, Notebook LM kind of has a tool for that. So I highly encourage you to use that if you haven't. And that's my approach to how I do it when I'm learning. And I would say that something that would have taken me 4 hours in the past to get references and read through them and understand them now takes me like 30 minutes. And I know it better after 30 minutes than I did in 4 hours before.
Thank you. Um, so what were the names of the databases you stated again?
So the models are open evidence, which is a large language model that's built on scientific publications. And about 50% of US clinicians use open evidence now. Consensus is just what it sounds like. Is there a consensus approach for screening for retinopathy of prematurity? And then it'll pull the articles together. And it uniquely shows you like these 8 articles actually support this consensus approach. These 2 articles don't support that consensus approach. And then perplexity is a model that uses many of the different functions of the bigger models. But the good thing is it provides references. But sometimes it does report like newspaper articles and opinions. But that one, when I use those three, I get a big capture of the information on a specific topic, and then I dump it into Notebook LM.
Thank you for that. It looks like we're out of time. Thank you all so very much for joining us today. Thank you, Malathi, Mia, and Jim. Those were great presentations, and we hope that you will join us for our next webinar, which is happening on Thursday, May 14th. More information to come on that. Our FCC Community Exchange event is happening 1 week from today at 2 p.m. EST. We hope to see you there as well, and I will be sure to send a follow-up email with all of the great information that was shared today.